That's a lot of years of training. What are you doing in all that time? I'd love to sort of drill down a little bit in that, because often breathwork schools, they teach a technique, you breathe in, you breathe out, that's really thorough.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, first of all, Mark, I really feel, this is something because I just love all of the people that are in love with breath. Breath has found them, however they're doing it. They have a love of breath, and I honor the passion, with which all of these people are wanting to bring the potency and the efficacy and also just the accessibility to the human species. So, and what I have felt has been a shadow in the breathwork field, kind of initially it was like in America, we would call it maybe the Wild West, but it was like, there was this discovery, and it was like finding fire. And like, it was also still when there was a kind of a hippie feel to the whole, to the world and all of that. And so I just honor the explosive energy and the courageousness of people, that did all of that were willing to explore the things that were coming up, from conception and birth and childhood and present day and, God and all of it. I started to feel at some point, like, with all of the beauty of that, there was a kind of a shadow in the breathwork movement that I think sometimes turns off what I'm going to call more sophisticated seekers, who have a sense about the delicacy, the nuance, of what it takes to actually build a vehicle that, might be called in the ancient literature, like literally a vehicle of light, like a body, heart awareness of capacity to receive the all that is. And I think it's because there's so much letting go in breath work. And there's such a sense of well-being that happens, any kind of breathing you do. And there's such a sense too of kind of breakthrough in the same way that psychedelics can do that, like you break through and you have these experiences, and that those three things are very compelling for people: the letting go of grief and trauma and hurt and pain, the breakthrough experiences of non-ordinary states of consciousness, and just feeling good, when so many of us haven't felt good. That I think the slight shadow has been the lack of understanding of what it actually takes to build that being that becomes a capacitor for the deepest levels of consciousness in every moment. You think about like Yo-Yo Ma, the great cellist, or Ishtar Perlman. Yes, they had a gift, but any of them will tell you they practice. Their life is basically like practicing. 4, 6, 8 hours a day, even after they become the world-class, most famous, whatever of. And so I feel like I'm really feeling a call to bring that into the breathwork field. Here we sit with what I'm going to, I hope it doesn't feel arrogant or bombastic, but just people can feel the simple truth of this. We sit here, all of us, not just breath workers, but all of us sit here with the most profound nutrient, medicine, friend, and awakener right in our own bodies, right in every moment of our own life. And so for me, training, I think the breath workers that I train, they go through years and years of personal development, their own work. I mean, the basic, the most important part of their training is themselves, the development of themselves. They get psychodynamic training, equivalent to what they might get in social work school or, psychotherapy courses of study. They study spiritual mystical states in a very sort of concrete way, and they have to have a facility, for instance, with both emptiness and devotion and sort of non-being and being, fullness and expression and impermanence and all of the permutations that come from that. Because otherwise what happens is, if what we really want to do is bring to the human species the power of this medicine and nutrient for their own lives, and then for their relational lives, and then for the collective, we have to be able to present the breath work in a way that leaves room for all of the different aspects of awakening and the different temperaments that come to it. Some people are much more resonant with the idea of impermanence and emptiness, and some with love and devotion and all of that. And I don't want to shape that for anybody. So all of our practitioners have to become comfortable with all of that and not have projections where they're needing their clients to go a certain way or where they're inducting them into a certain thing. And so when you just put all of that together, and we watch them do sessions for a long time. Now they're practicing. When I say that, the training is 3 to 7 years, after about, they're taking clients in there. And so there's a gradation. It's just when they get their permanent certification, which is also the international certification that we give through the Global Professional Breathwork Alliance now, which my co-director, Jim Morningstar, is also speaking on this conference, the Embodiment Conference. That's the kind of training that they've gone through, honestly,
So this Breathworker Alliance, why did that get set up? What's the history of that? It seems like we're on sort of Breathwork 2.0 now, or maybe 3.0 or something else, depending on how we do it. But there was, as you say, this history of the kind of pioneers in the 60s and 70s, this very kind of, intense and sort of state pumping kind of Wild West a little bit. And now we're seeing, scientific research, we're seeing sort of different schools comparing, and we're also seeing people just rediscovering this, people just rediscovering breath work. It seems to be kind of in vogue. What is this Breathwork Alliance? How did that get started?
Beautiful. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I was listening to one of your things about embodiment. You were going like #embodiment. It's like everywhere, it's sort of trending, and of course breathwork too. But I said that in 2012 at our first breath immersion conference, from the science to the samadhi. In 2013, I said, sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, breathwork's going to just explode, and it's going to be, because it's for everybody. It's for everybody. So in 2001, Jim Morningstar and had a panel at a global inspiration conference with myself and Tav Sparks, who was Stan Groff's right-hand man. He passed recently, and people that are listening may have known of Tav, and he was a stellar, exquisite human being that really contributed to our understanding of the inner dimensions. And then Gay Hendricks, who's a psychologist. And a lot of what we were talking about was the wisdom in finding a way to have training for breath workers be more complete and more grounded and more connected to a wisdom. And there were 60 amazing breath workers there, and they gave Jim and I a kind of vote of confidence to begin this organization. And we had data. Jim collected data from 21 schools around the planet about what their training program was and what their ethics were. By the way, I'm a great believer in naming the shadows so that things get better. And, that was one of the problems in the early breathwork movement too, is that there were.
And what was that specifically? Sort of sexual stuff, financial stuff? I mean, I guess like anything where there's a high that people associate that state with the person and not the practice, right? And then it's very easy once that attachment's been made for someone to take advantage of that.
You've got it, Mark, of course. And that of course happened, and so there were sexual boundaries that were crossed. There were financial boundaries, I think, that were crossed. And we just, and there was also just like, we didn't want the whole guru, development guru thing to be going on through the breathwork movement. So anyway, over the next 2 years, I helped develop a set of ethics in conjunction with some other beautiful breathworkers on the planet. I was very honored to, kind of spearhead that. And we created not only a really wonderful set of ethics for all breathworkers, but we created a kind of restoration, if you know about restorative justice, like if somebody was going off the rails, how would we not excommunicate them and cancel them,
Right. Well, that's supposed to, yeah.
No cancel culture here because we have to redeem everybody somehow. But how could we restore them so that they were contributing? So we have a whole process that we go through with that as well.
Can I jump on that? I'm going to jump in if I may, because this is quite rare and unusual. That ethics is, some places don't have any ethics. Then the normal approach is if you break these rules, you're out, which is better than nothing and can keep people safe. And, that can be useful. But then there isn't often this conversation of redemption, like how do people get back? Right. So like someone slips up or, even worse, someone has a track record over years.
Yes.
What's their route back to being a teacher again? Or is that barred for them? Like, how does that work in terms of you're very encouraged to hear that there's an alternative to simply sort of canceling people and dehumanizing them that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Mark, wouldn't we love to live in the world where I just want to say, I believe this is possible. I don't know whether we're 5 years away or 50 or 500, but I believe that when human beings are able to embody their full potential and consciousness, we will have the collective wisdom of how to relate to even psychopaths, for instance, in a way that brings value to their lives in a way that they can contribute. Because at the heart, when I said everybody wants to be loved, another way that I could have said that is everybody wants to feel like their life has meaning, it has purpose. And so, these are secrets that can be unlocked, and it's going to take all of us working together. So, this is my attempt towards that orientation. Restorative justice is it's an idea that was championed by, for instance, Bo Lozoff, who started the Prison Ashram Project with Ram Dass's, support and even a financial grant, and has affected hundreds of thousands of prisoners around the world. What we have is we have a 5-step process. So we ask breath workers to sign on to the ethics if they want to have the global professional certification. And we ask, the first step is for them to become aware that they've made a breach. And if they are aware of that and they can correct it themselves, so it's a self-awareness piece, then we encourage them to do that and then to share with another human being, kind of like a 12-step thing, somebody who has some wisdom in the breathwork field that they've done that. If that isn't happening and the client becomes aware that a breach has happened, and they can bring it to that breathworker, and if they cannot get satisfaction or get a healing that they need, they can take it to a group like that person's teacher or a group of breathworkers, or even to the Global Professional Breathwork Alliance. The breathworker who's needing to restore themselves and not have their gifts get thrown away, can also, at that level, at step 2, they can acknowledge and realize and go into a healing process with that person. The 3rd step has to do with if a group of breath workers or a breath worker becomes aware that someone else is doing something that is not in client's best interest, they can go to that breath worker. And then if they are not able to make any headway, they can create a community of breath workers, and there can be an intervention. The intervention would have to do with community building. You know, it would have to do with kind of like alternative dispute resolution that has been championed actually right here in the state of Maryland, where sometimes even criminal activities are not adjudicated, but they are brought to a community conferencing, and the police and the person who did the thing and the family and the victim and all of that sit together and keep talking, kind of like a Quaker thing, until they can figure out how restoration could be made outside of the jail system.
I come across this in the slums of Brazil when I was working there, something called restorative circles, restorative justice. There's a sort of whole movement around this.
Yes. Well,
radical alternative. Yeah.
Well, we have a beautiful woman here in Maryland, Rachel Wall, who was the first. She directed the Alternative Dispute Resolution Council and created this whole process, and now teaches nationally and all of that. But at any rate, so we can do that in the field of breathwork. We can create a community process. And then, of course, in that community process, my experience of it is that recommendations are made, like, here's what you would need to do. And it might involve, I have had one practitioner, for instance, who was a psychologist, who, fortunately, it had nothing to do with our school, but, you know, there was a breach with a psychology person, but they were in training for breath work. And we had to ask them to step away from it and go through all of these self-evaluation, therapy, trauma stuff with themselves. You know, sometimes there's amends to the person if that person, you know, so it could be highly creative. We don't know what it's going to be. Certain practices, mentoring, people, you know, having to meet with us periodically. But you know, and then of course, if we cannot make any headway that way, the last step would be that we bring in outside mediation of some kind. We go to some kind of, you know, professional, not just mediation, but supervision, and get some kind of, you know, help that way. But we've never had to do that. And I'm happy to say, you know, I'm happy to be forthright about it, that even some breath workers who were a little loose and, you know, whatever, have really come around. And I can say that the healing process really works. Yeah. So
that's really encouraging to hear, Jessica. It's lovely that you're doing that. And, you know, it's interesting. I think we're getting into a world of governing bodies, and that could be a step back and be very restrictive, or it could be a step forward. And this very much feels like the latter, you know, as different yoga or, you know, martial arts, as different. I've seen it be a step back in certain communities where it feels just like restrictive and government rules and power plays. You know, people in Europe, there's certain countries where you can't teach aikido or can't teach yoga unless you sign up for certain things. And in other places, it feels like, wow, okay, this is really a step forward.
Well, Mark, I think that's an incredibly astute observation on your part. And I remember I actually wrote a letter, or, you know, an essay to the breathwork world back in 2002 or 3. And I said, listen, our greatest challenge is going to be that here we hold a medicine that is, I mean, we see spontaneous healings. You know, I've seen, sorry, but it's true, I've seen tumors like just disappear. You know, we've seen people have a direct contact with God with no intermediary. People heal, people embody, people, you know, so here we have this profound medicine. And our greatest challenge over the next decade or two is going to be, how do we keep the profundity of that medicine without dumbing it down, and still make it relevant and accessible to mainstream and professional culture? So the development of professional breathwork that is not a dumbed down version of breathwork was there for me since 2002. And it's one of the things I've just had to really hold, you know, in all of the settings, all of the meetings, all of the conferences. We cannot sacrifice one or the other. And I think it's a great model. I think we're making our way. And I'm very proud every day of just different little breath workers I hear about throughout the world who are holding different pieces in ethical ways, or, you know, realizing they contact the Global Professional Breathwork Alliance if they want to be certified, and how do they need to transform their training a little bit so that it fits the standards. I am so heartened. I think we're gonna, you know, God willing, inshallah, as they say, we are going to pull this off, where we are going to have the full-blown form of breath work in therapeutic settings, professional, ethical grounding. And in fact, I'm writing a book right now about integrating breath work into psychotherapy, and it's close to being done. And yeah, so I'm really happy about this.
Wonderful. This is like a great book. It's sometimes I feel sad that the sort of therapists don't necessarily know about these somatic tools. You know, there's such just, you know, centering tools from my background, or breathwork tools, you know, that can be quite straightforward for people to learn, and, you know, can be integrated into other more cognitive approaches. Listen.